If there's two similarly attractive girls in a nightclub, men are more likely to be drawn to the one that's ovulating rather than on her period. Men can perceive that on a sort of unconscious level.
So all men have this skill.
I don't think we know this.
Dr. Tara Swart is a neuroscientist and author of The Source, whose work has made her a leading voice in how to harness the power of your brain to create strong relationships.
I basically call the brain the CEO of the body. It's got leadership over every aspect of your life, and that includes relationships.
Let's say that you're using neuroscience as a cheat code in your relationship. How do you define love?
That's actually much more multi-layered than you might think. Love is an ancient structure in the brain. If you are wanting to form a bond, then you actually would...
Wow, okay.
The longer sex is withheld, the higher the hormone levels are going to get.
If you have sex immediately, there's a low likelihood that you will bond with them.
Well, that's the million-dollar question, Paul.
That's why you're here.
This is a really interesting one. So of the five senses, smell isn't the biggest attractor, but I think it's the biggest...
Before we get into it, I just wanted to mention something interesting that we've noticed recently. Around 9 in 10 of you watching these videos aren't subscribed yet. Now, no pressure at all, but if you're enjoying the content, subscribing is a super simple way to stay connected with us, and it also helps us out a ton with growing the channel. We also look at every comment, so make sure you comment with your guest ideas below, and we'll be sure to take note, and we'll try to get your favorite guest on future episodes. I appreciate you being here, so thanks for watching, and let's get into it.
But what I'd love to begin with is, why do you believe our brain function is so important? How does it inform our relationships?
I basically call the brain the CEO of the body. So it's got leadership over every aspect of your life. It's obvious with things like health and well-being. But if you think about the things that most people want in life, it's health, love, wealth, and, perhaps some other things that keep us secure and safe, and then individual things. But it comes down pretty much to happiness, health, wealth, and relationships. So, and I speak a lot about the other things and not so much about relationships, which is why I was excited to have this conversation with you today. I remember when I got my first request to speak on a podcast about relationships, I was getting my hair blown out. And I looked at this email, which came an hour before the podcast, and I thought, I'm a neuroscientist. I don't speak about that. But actually, obviously, it makes sense that, one could, and I have done a lot more research since then. Let's start with the negative side of the coin,
Okay.
which is just that if anyone or both of the parties are under stress, and this applies to family and friends as well as romantic relationships, then there's a lowered capacity to operate at your best, which is inevitably going to affect your relationships, right?
Yes.
And then on the other side of the coin, if we're taking care of our brain and doing certain practices that keep our brain not in the stress state, but in the love and trust state, then also equally you can see how conducive that's likely to be to you being able to care for a loved one as well as yourself.
Yes, yes. So ultimately, because you're seeing the brain as the CEO, essentially, of our life, right? That the brain ultimately is critical to our relationships. It's critical.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at the brain in the most basic sense, what are the components of our brain, the main components as it relates to relationships?
So that's actually much more multi-layered than you might think.
Okay.
Because we've got the outer cortex, which is kind of holding our working memory and what we need to do today to survive, and to some extent to thrive. So that will be, don't have an argument with my wife, don't lose my job, put food on the table, pay my bills, etc. And then deeper in the limbic system, which is the size of your clenched fist.
Okay.
And then we've got this layer of cortex, which is quite thick now. But since we've evolved from the cave, we see that love isn't in the outer cortex, it's in the limbic system and below. So love is an ancient structure in the brain.
Interesting.
Even when we couldn't speak and we had the limbic system with a very thin sliver of cortex around it, we had love. And then through the spine and other nerves, we have the gut-brain axis. So actually that's important in relationships too, because if you live with someone and you share cutlery with them, share a bathroom with them, share a bed with them, kiss them, cuddle them, if you think about the skin microbiome, the oral microbiome, and the gut microbiome, you actually start to share your microbiomes. And usually the healthier partner will donate cells to the one whose immunity isn't as strong.
Wow, look at that. The importance of having a strong partner, literally.
Literally.
Literally. We had love before we could even speak, right? We had love. How do you define love?
Well, that's the $1 million question, Paul.
That's why you're here.
In those sort of tribal times, it would have been about trust and bonding. And of course, people would love their children, but there would have been a larger element of wanting to see your genes survive. So if we look at animal studies, what do animals do if they love their children? They protect them, they shelter them, they feed them, they defend them against attack. They usually, well, most mammals are not monogamous. So if they choose to be monogamous, then they're pairing up to defend those children. If they're the opposite of that, which is promiscuous, then they're just trying to find as many females as possible to pass their genes on, and then just leave the females to defend the young, because if the environment's safe, they can do that. If it's an unsafe environment, then they're more likely to stay in the nest.
Okay. The definition of love there is really around protecting and providing, in essence. Is there an emotional aspect to love as well?
Yeah, so again, I'm actually quoting from research about voles, little rodents. And prairie and pine voles are monogamous, and marsh and meadow voles are promiscuous. And the reason is that there's sparse shelter and food on the prairie. So if the male vole was promiscuous, there's a big chance that his offspring would die. So it makes more sense for him to partner up and stay in the nest and provide food and fend off aggressors. But between the mummy and the daddy vole, there is a change in gene expression, in brain receptors, both where they are and which hormones they bind with, and differences in the levels of the key hormones here, which are oxytocin, vasopressin, dopamine, and testosterone.
These oxytocin all the way through is, I would love for you to talk about these chemicals in the brain, because it seems as if I often hear people misquoting what, like, you're excreting dopamine. What does that mean? Like, it was like, are you really excreting dopamine?
No.
That sounds a little, a
Yeah.
little wild. So what do you think are the most important chemicals in the brain as it relates to our relationships?
I would put oxytocin at number one. It's
Okay.
the bonding hormone. And so that absolutely relates to romantic relationships, also bonding with your children, but also family, friends, social, and work even. And society. I mean, when there are low societal levels of oxytocin, that's where we see the fabric of society break down in terms of things like riots and turning against the structures that we have chosen to put in place to keep us safe, like the police and the legal system.
Okay. And can we pause on oxytocin? Because you said this is the most important, right? So oxytocin, men, women, we all produce it. How is it produced? Or what drives the increase in our production of oxytocin?
So mostly through physical touch. So things like holding hands, cuddling, stroking. You would get it if you stroked your pet as well. Bathing, because you're immersed in warmth, so it kind of feels like a hug. Obviously sex, particularly at orgasm, really high kind of like levels of oxytocin then. And I think the one that, if you've had a child, that incredible feeling of just being so in love, like you're in a love bubble, that's oxytocin.
You're producing that, so that's your perception. And does it matter if the partner or the person is also producing oxytocin as well?
No. So I think you're referring to something that I speak about much more widely, which is the effect of cortisol between people. So
Interesting.
leakage of cortisol into the atmosphere affecting other people's stress levels. With oxytocin, it doesn't work like that. We're getting our own levels of oxytocin, and we could have very different levels of oxytocin for different reasons. And actually, this is one of the most damaging things to a relationship, when the levels of oxytocin become very different. So one partner is still bonded, but the other partner is losing that connection, because it creates both often shows of contempt in the partner with lower oxytocin, but also a kind of, need to hold on and fix things and try to make it better in the person who still has a lot of oxytocin and can feel that that's not mutual.
Wow. Is there an optimal level of oxytocin we should be aiming for? I mean, should we all have a full tank, in essence, of oxytocin?
I mean, you can't spread too much love, can you? I mean, the world, I think, will be a much better place if we all have higher levels of oxytocin.
All right, done. We should package this up. We should do this. Are people? No one's, because everyone injects everything else. Can you actually have oxytocin injected?
I do not want anyone to do this. But if you Google oxytocin nasal spray, there is such a thing.
Really?
And in experiments where men and women were asked to rate photos of people on attractiveness, before and after, so they rated them just by looking at the photos, then they took oxytocin nasal spray. They rated everyone as more attractive afterwards.
Oh my gosh.
But the stuff that's available on the internet, please, it cannot be clean. We don't know what it is.
Don't do. All right, yeah. Fair. That's interesting. A lot of people are running to Google oxytocin nasal spray. So what are the other chemicals that you believe are important?
So I rated oxytocin number 1 because it's the main one that correlates with love and trust.
Okay.
But there's one called vasopressin, which in both genders is responsible for blood pressure, the number of electrolytes in your blood, and blood volume. But in men, it is also to do with bonding, aggression, but aggression related to protecting your partner and your young.
Okay.
And sexual interest.
The higher the vasopressin, the more sexual interest.
Yeah, so if a heterosexual couple are dating and the woman's enjoying it, she's likely to have high levels of oxytocin and dopamine. And please remind me to come back to why dopamine is important next.
Okay.
For the guy, it's going to be levels of dopamine, oxytocin, and vasopressin as long as they're dating but haven't had sex yet. So the longer sex is withheld, the higher those levels are going to get in the man and the more likely he is to bond to the woman. Once they have sex, the level of vasopressin plummets, and so it changes how influential oxytocin can be on their testosterone. Because yes, we both produce oxytocin, but because men produce so much more testosterone than women, it has a buffering effect on oxytocin.
Okay.
So if you are, wanting to form a bond, then you actually would try to keep the vasopressin levels high for as long as you can.
If you have sex immediately with your partner, then there's a low likelihood that you will bond with them.
Well, let me just slightly rephrase that, because I'm assuming they're not partners yet.
Okay, correct.
So
correct.
The bonding may or may not come if you work on it. But in terms of the hormones helping you to get that to the right place to make this relationship more likely to succeed, it's going to go against that.
It's going to go against that. So if we're thinking about neuroscience, if we're thinking about our brain, we're thinking about biology in trying to help us to form a connection, it sounds like you're saying it's to our advantage to hold back from having sex early.
To delay.
And
do all the other things that build up oxytocin, like hand-holding, cuddling, stroking, kissing. And, eye contact and obviously the other stuff that you talk about, like talking and listening.
Talking is important, that stuff.
Yeah. But I'm just sticking to the angle that I can bring you. With the monogamous voles, they get a stress response if they see their partner in distress.
Okay.
They will try to physically soothe them if possible. And they will also always choose their partner over a new stranger that is a potential mate.
Interesting.
But the promiscuous voles won't do that.
They'll just, whoever comes by,
yeah.
in essence.
Yeah, and that's because largely it's to do with the difference in vasopressin levels.
Okay. Interesting. All right. So with vasopressin, we're going to come to dopamine, but with vasopressin, what I'm going to walk away with is it's to our advantage to have to increase the level of vasopressin. And so therefore, if we're in a new relationship, it is to our advantage to delay. But is there a period of time which you have delayed to the point where the vasopressin expires, or it's no longer to our benefit to delay?
Yeah, that I would answer that like how long is a piece of string. So there isn't a time period scientifically where it kind of reaches a maximum and then tends to drop off. But I think that would be something you would judge in your relationship. Like, are we becoming friend-zoned? You know, do we need to move things to the next level? Are we both ready to move things to the next level? The way to answer that is there sufficient bonding perceived by both parties that it's not going to be disrupted by having sex?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm with you. So then dopamine seems to be another important. I mean, I hear people talking about dopamine more than oxytocin, not definitely vasopressin. So what exactly is dopamine, and why is it so important in our relationships?
So again, as with vasopressin, a lot of these neurotransmitters and hormones have dual roles. So dopamine is actually very much implicated in movement and motivation to move towards something physically. But it also underlies motivation to do something, to seek a reward. And it is released in bursts when we get a reward.
Okay. So the moment that we're rewarded for anything, we get a burst of dopamine, and that feels good. It makes us feel good. So dopamine is temporary.
Yeah.
It's a temporary feel good.
Yeah.
All right, this is interesting. So are there any other chemicals that you consider to be important as it relates to relationships?
I mean, obviously there will be the sex steroid hormones, testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone.
Okay.
But in terms of the mental part of pair bonding, I'm going to stick with those ones. If you film people in a nightclub dancing and ask men to rate which women they find the most attractive, you will find that those women are mid-cycle and ovulating.
That they find most attractive?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because they're fertile.
And how is that? How do they know? How are they able to identify that?
It's something to do with like the hip movements and the swaying and kind of just the even gait, which is the way that you walk. So something changes around that time and men can perceive that on a sort of unconscious level.
Really? So all men have this skill?
Yeah.
I don't think we know this, that we have this skill.
No.
So we all can perceive this.
Yeah.
This is fascinating.
I mean, it may not be conscious.
Right.
But, you know, if there's two similarly attractive girls in a nightclub and you're watching them dance, you are more likely to be drawn to the one that's ovulating rather than on her period.
Okay.
And when a woman is ovulating, she's more likely to choose a bad boy. But when she's on her period, she's more likely to choose someone that she would end up pair bonding with.
Why so?
Because it's a little bit like the promiscuous bulls. When you're ovulating, you have a drive to reproduce. But when you're not fertile, you will be, doing what we said about the oxytocin and the trying to bond and have, a man that's going to stay for the long term rather than...
So you say women who are single looking for a partner, when they're ovulating, they should not be out in these clubs. Only when they're on their period.
Or on the app.
Or on the apps, right. This is interesting. So you are more likely to choose the bad boy because you're looking for more options at that point.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. And all of this comes from this is evolutionary psychology in essence, right? This is just where we've come from.
So it's... The level up, I think, is that it's evolutionary neuroscience. So it's not just about what we're thinking and how we're feeling. It's about what's going on with the hormones and the genes and the receptors behind that. So if we come back to dopamine in terms of pair bonding, then if you are in a bonded pair, you get a dopamine hit when you just see your partner or even a photo of them.
Okay.
Or recall a memory of them. So, that's increasing the bonding all the time because... it's nice to feel rewarded, right? And
Yes.
on the other side of it, it's also to do with addiction. Motivation is on a spectrum with addiction. So then unrequited love, basically when you can't have the object of your love, is is often interchangeable with drug and alcohol abuse. So, that's an explanation for why a lot of people after a breakup might drink more than they used to, or, take drugs to alleviate that pain, because it's only an equivalent thing that can give you the dopamine and the noradrenaline that will temporarily take away the feeling of heartbreak.
Sure. Wow. So in that early stage of a relationship, the key is that you want to do all of those things that'll drive oxytocin, keep your vasopressin levels high, and that you're getting those hits of dopamine along the way.
Yeah.
Right. That's the key.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, you have sex. How do you keep the vasopressin then present? Right. How and I guess ultimately what I'm saying is that let's say that you're using this, I'll call it neuroscience, as a cheat code in your relationship. So right now you're listening, you're watching, you're saying, okay, look, what I'm going to do is, there's someone who I've started dating and I want to make sure that I'm using everything to my advantage. How do they then know, and this is based on neuroscience, how do they know the right time to have sex?
So there is a gender difference here.
Okay.
Which is that women will experience the effects of oxytocin at orgasm every time. Because of that buffering by testosterone that I mentioned earlier, if it happens too soon and the vasopressin levels go low, then the man's oxytocin levels will struggle to get high. So what you're actually trying to do is keep the vasopressin up here and slowly build up the oxytocin till it gets to the point where it doesn't matter what the vasopressin is anymore.
Okay.
Because then you've got the oxytocin and the testosterone both at high levels. The issue is when, it doesn't matter whether it's too soon, or just when it starts, that the bonding that is caused by oxytocin will happen for the woman. And so it's more about making sure that it's also happening for the man.
For the man.
Once you have both got to that level, then actually repeated mating, as we say in the science, but, having lots of sex.
I've never heard that, repeated mating.
Yeah.
Okay.
Having lots of sex, let's put it that way, will actually further increase the bond.
Okay.
So when you are in a pair bond with somebody that you want to stay with and you've got the high levels of oxytocin, then having sex actually drives the wiring of the brain differently in terms of how it interacts with those hormones.
Okay.
So it's not just about the levels and the presence of those hormones, it's about which receptors they're binding with and where.
Okay, fair enough.
So we see that the dopamine receptors in the monogamous brains are in the reward areas more. So the nucleus accumbens and the ventral pallidum. In the promiscuous voles, they're not as concentrated in the reward areas. So you don't get the same feeling from seeing someone that you're, even if you've had sex with them. With epigenetics, which is the effect of the environment on our genes, we've moved away from saying this is your DNA pool and this is the personality and the relationship style that you're stuck with, to saying that depending on the environment, so I've given a very natural environment, like a meadow that's got lots of food and lots of shelter versus a prairie that, where there's no shelter and the food is few and far between. But also your environment is shaped by the nature of the relationships that you've had since childhood and that you have as an adult. And that can actually help certain genes to switch on or off. So you could, through psychological work, basically, switch from the promiscuous to the prefers cuddling.
Okay.
But, that's a very, very complex kind of dynamic system, but
it's possible.
It's possible.
Right. All right. Super. So then if we're looking at other elements that shape at least the chemical aspect is fatherhood. Because that's something that has I would say a significant impact on oxytocin in particular.
We used to think that oxytocin only really happened significantly, as you say, between the mother and the newborn child. Recent research has shown that new fathers, particularly first-time fathers, brains are rewired by oxytocin. I think this has happened because we didn't live like that in the cave. But for a long time now, most societies have asked us to live in unit families and, stay with your children and look after them and provide for them. And so we think over time, the brain has started to become rewired. When you became a dad for the first time, the oxytocin that you would have got, and that's why skin-to-skin contact is encouraged so much, particularly with dads. And when I have friends who become a dad for the first time, the gift that I always give is that little blanket with the animal head on it. And I say, rub it in your armpits after paternity leave and basically put it in the cot with the baby when you're away at work all day, because then it will keep smelling you and it will keep bonding with you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So oxytocin rewires your brain away from the competitiveness of testosterone towards the protectiveness of oxytocin. And so your testosterone levels will actually drop when you first have a child. If they sleep in the same room as you, then your testosterone levels drop even further.
Is this why I have no testosterone? Because my children are 10 and 13, and they'll still from time to time jump in the bed. This is why I have no testosterone right now.
It's cute that you put it that way. I know when I was working with my hedge fund executives, they were like, get that baby out of the room. I have to be trading.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is and so because I noticed you said first, because I know you're very particular. So you said when children are first in the bed. So does the testosterone come back as it does? Okay. All right. Fair.
It will probably never go back to the level it was prior to ever becoming a dad, but it will go back to the level before what happened when they were sleeping in the same room as you.
Okay.
Does that reassure you, Paul?
It does. But I also would imagine, too, is there are benefits to having lower testosterone, right? We're going to be less aggressive. Yeah. It's a positive.
Yeah.
There must be some other positives, too.
Well, think about why most leaders in pretty much any industry are over the age of 35. Because they've got lower testosterone, they've got better judgment. They're not as impulsive. They're not as aggressive.
All right. This is good. So everyone should have their baby in their bed. No. All right. So now, always a challenging one, but pornography. Mm-hmm. How does pornography, do you believe, how does that impact brain chemicals?
So obviously it won't be having any impact on oxytocin. And potentially you could argue that it would lower levels of oxytocin. It will be releasing tremendous amounts of dopamine and noradrenaline. So that relates back to what I said about addiction. It is obviously addictive. And the societal issue that I see with it is that the ideal of what a woman has to look like and what she has to behave like to produce anything like the level of reward in a man's brain in real life, they become so polarized that it can become impossible for men to get gratification in real life in the way that they can through pornography.
Interesting.
Almost anything within moderation doesn't necessarily have to damage your life. So alcohol can damage your life, but not if you drink within the normal limits.
Fair. So do you think pornography destroys men's sex life?
I would go as far as saying that, yeah.
That's strong.
I'm always tempered in what I say, but with that one, I'm going to go with it, yeah.
Yeah. We had a guest on. Interesting enough, her name is Dr. Tara as well.
Oh.
Yeah, it was wild. And what's interesting is, so she and her partner, she's married, and they attend sex parties. When they attend the sex parties, they're not necessarily participating with other people, but they're watching what's happening. Mm-hmm. Voyeurism, in essence. Mm-hmm. And then they're also having sex in front of others. Mm-hmm. How does that? How does a relationship like that? How are our brain chemicals impacted there?
Like pornography, it would be producing high levels of dopamine and noradrenaline. It's the voyeurism, the exhibitionism, there's a thrill related with those things. I would put people into two camps here. I would say that, of course, there must be people who come to this agreement and this arrangement and it works for them. I would also say, from my former role as a psychiatrist, that when I have seen people with what is diagnosed as deviant sexual behavior, there is 100% of the time a history of trauma and abuse as a child.
Okay, fair enough. And, you know, and I appreciate that. And I'll tell you, the drive of asking this is that I see that, to your point, this is activity that is on the fringe. However, what I see happening, especially with television and social media and podcasting, et cetera, is that the conversation has become so plentiful that many people are evaluating whether or not that's a road that they want to go down. I think it's important to be aware of the impact that it has in our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't want to be judgmental at all, but usually it becomes a problem for one of the parties.
For one of the parties.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. So you had talked about the importance of smell with regard to fathers rubbing in their armpits. That's without deodorant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Get all in there and drop it in there. Now, how important do you think smell is with regard to selecting a partner?
This is a really interesting one. So of the 5 senses, I would say that for humans, visual is the first one, and that sound is the second one. So the voice and accent of the person.
Okay.
And smell is third. And then touch and then taste. So smell isn't the biggest attractor, but I think it's the biggest detractor. So let's say you had a fantasy about a supermodel your whole life and then you met her, but she had bad breath.
Yes.
It would put you off.
These are facts. Yes. These are facts. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in terms of bonding, we think this is partly mediated through smell. There is something called the major histocompatibility complex, which is an imprint of your immune system. So if you like someone's smell, it's likely that they have a very different MHC to you, because that's going to make your children essentially bilingual in their immune systems, and that's advantageous for them.
Okay. And I'm sorry, MHC is?
Major histocompatibility complex. I was trying to not make you make me say it again.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is interesting.
You know, people can go out with somebody that they don't necessarily think are really good looking. But physiologically, it's quite hard to be with somebody if you actively don't like their smell. If you like their smell, then it means it's more likely that their immune system is very diverse to yours. And that's why.
Okay.
So this isn't a predictor of a relationship success. It's a predictor of successful offspring.
Yes, I see. And literally successful offspring mean the viability of that offspring. Will they be able to survive?
Not just will they be able to survive, but there could be many babies that would survive, but have quite a limited gut microbiome and MHC.
Which means? No.
But to give your children a bilingual or much more broad immune imprint is advantageous for them.
Wow. Well, do you advise people dating to see if they to consciously examine if they like the smell of their partner?
Yeah.
Yeah. First date?
And ongoing.
Ongoing?
Yeah.
So literally it's like
keep gathering data.
Lift up the arm and take a sniff?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So this is interesting because the importance of smell is something that I don't think is talked about enough. But I'm with you. It's incredibly important, and it's an evolutionary gift that's been handed down to us.
Because for animals, that's actually probably the primary one in terms of knowing who your cubs are, loving them and protecting them.
Okay.
And because of this immune system broadening, smell would be a much more important modality for animals than visual or sound.
All right, fair. Can we spend a moment on visual and sound? Mm-hmm. Because I think with visual, there's a lot of conversation around what is considered to be attractive. Mm-hmm. I would imagine that attraction, it's relative. It's relative. So what informs our perspective of physical attraction?
I think we can probably all agree on certain looks that are quite universally pleasing, not, and I've used that word instead of attractive, because you
Okay.
can look at someone and say they're really beautiful, but not be attracted to them.
Okay.
And of course, this will vary around the world. So there are different ideals in different cultures, for example. I imagine there'll be something genetic. I always had this theory that you're either a gene pool expander or a gene pool solidifier. So you either go for someone that looks like they could be your sibling, or you go for someone that's like completely opposite to you.
Yes.
And I haven't got the science to prove that, but I have a lot of anecdotal evidence of it.
All right. Fair.
So I think there's so many factors involved here. It is obviously what people look like, what they sound like, what they smell like, what their values are, and common goals and interests, family situations, but it will probably be something partly genetic as well.
Okay.
And it will definitely be something that is an indicator to you of the other person's fertility. Even if you don't want to have kids, that is a factor in our choice of partner.
So can we break that down? I've heard many people call it the golden mean. And I think, okay, is this really a thing? And ultimately what the golden mean stated was that if you look at a woman and look at the differential between her waist and hips, if the hips are, if the margin is 50 percentile or greater, it suggests that she is fertile and so therefore appears to be more attractive.
So certain cultures have it. Women tend to fall into a more of an apple shape or more of a pear shape, and so if that's the norm in your culture, then you as a man are going to find that attractive. So you're describing more the pear shape, which applies to many cultures around the world. But if you look at sort of like South Asia and Southeast Asia and the rest of Asia, the shape is quite different. But for people of that culture, there's a different indicator of what look makes you look fertile.
That's fascinating. And that comes from, that's just evolution.
Yeah. So basically, there's a theory about the monsoon diet for, the sort of Asian diaspora, which is that it was advantageous to store a bit more belly fat for times when, it's kind of feast or famine. And so if you think about the fact that Indian women wear saris and they show their belly, that's attractive to Indian men.
Okay.
Whereas in, the Western world, it's attractive to have a flat belly, a small waist, and a larger bottom.
Look at that.
Or larger hips, I should
larger
say.
hips, yeah. It's all the same, Are there indicators for men that appear to be, I wouldn't necessarily, it would be still more fertile, right? For the men. So what are the indicators? Because I've always heard it's shoulder to waist ratio.
Mm-hmm. The first one, which I'm sure you see on all of your data, is height.
Yes.
That's just the absolute sort of given. And then, yes, broad shoulders, musculature. But again, that will vary from culture to culture.
If someone is not physically pleasing, or the sound is not pleasing, or the smell is not pleasing from that first interaction with them, should you give them another chance?
I think I'm going to say something you're not going to expect. If the smell is the biggest attractor. So if the smell is not pleasing, I would say probably not. With the other two, I would say give people a chance. So what I hear a lot of my friends saying is something about the way he dresses or, the state of his body. And I always say those things can change. But you can't change your smell. And you can't change your voice. You could change your accent if that was an issue. But so I think because I'm just such an oxytocin person, so I just want everyone to be happy and like give more chances and let things work out. So yeah, I think as long as you've got your boundaries and your intentions right, there's no harm in giving people a few like I said, in moderation. Go on 2 or 3 dates.
Right.
Don't drag it out for 10 dates if you really don't find them visually pleasing. But if it's something that could change, like if they changed their weight or they, toned up in a different way or they dressed differently or something, then, I think that could still be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that was shocking to hear from you, but I'm with you.
Oh,
I agree with that.
Good.
I absolutely agree.
Oh, I'm pleased.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
Dating can often feel like a lot of pressure, especially when we're focused on finding the one. But what if we change the narrative with the help of today's show sponsor, Tinder? A great date might lead to you learning a new skill or discovering a hidden gem in your city. You might even meet a new lifelong friend. Sometimes it's just about enjoying the moment and sharing an experience with someone new. Tinder is a place for all types of relationships. Whether you're looking for love, friendship, or simply a great date, it's designed to help you explore every possibility. Dating isn't about success or failure. It's about the journey. So take the pressure off, open your mind, and embrace the adventure. Wherever it takes you, it starts with a swipe. Download Tinder today and see where your next connection might lead.
So now we want to dig into, you frame this as the source, right? The source. What is the source, and why is the source so important to us?
From my point of view, the source is basically your brain firing on all cylinders. So it's you at your best in a more kind of relational way, but from the neuroscience and cognitive science, it's about creating the conditions in your body, in your environment, and that includes relationships, so that you can take some healthy risks and, do feel more agency over your life and don't feel like life is just happening to you and you feel a bit powerless to do anything about it. Don't have regrets. One of the ways I get people to think about whether they want to go on that journey is, has your life panned out as you always dreamt that it would? And if the answer to that is no, I just really want people to understand that there is so much potential in the brain to change that, much more than people may think.
Is this where manifesting and it comes in?
Yeah.
All right. So this is an area that I have honestly struggled with.
Oh, at its absolute simplest level, and this is why I really invite people not to be skeptical about it, it's setting a goal and doing what you need to do to make that goal become true.
Okay.
So you can't really argue with that as a, something that people could or, might want to do. The manifestation part of it is, well, prior to me writing the source, the general consensus was that the universe or a higher power or certain types of energy could help you to get the things that you want in your life via a certain way of thinking or visualizing or creating a visual image, like a vision board of the things that you want. But the way that story was told kind of made people feel like they didn't actually have to do anything but say, I'd love to have a house in the Hamptons, you
Right.
know. And that there was some mysterious force that would make it happen, which I actually feel is quite disempowering for people. So over a summer, I just decided to Google what are the laws of attraction and see how much cognitive science I could pin to them. And so the first thing I found was that there wasn't even universal agreement about what they were or how many there were. So I kind of grouped them into 6 categories, and immediately I could see there's so much cognitive science that can explain this. And what I like about that is saying, you, Paul, with your brain power, your intelligence, your creativity, your motivation, your intuition, you can make things happen in the world that you really want. But you must be going out there and doing something to make it happen, not sitting at home, creating a fantasy and just waiting for it to fall out of the sky.
Right. And that's very empowering. Very. So how do we do this? I mean, how do we manifest? Because one part of this is it's so interesting, because I would argue that most of us don't believe we have that power. So how do we do it?
Let's put it like this, just to make it really tangible. It's to do with neuro-plasticity, which is the fact that our brain is growing and changing throughout our lives. I think that one of the reasons people thought that they couldn't do it is because we believed for such a long time. I mean, until 20, 30 years ago, that not even 30, 20, that by the time you physically stopped growing, so usually around the age of 18, that your brain also completely stopped growing and changing, and that you were stuck with the personality, the IQ, the EQ, the capability, as it were, to do new things. Then once we had sophisticated scanning technology, because before that, in neurology, we really only understood how the brain worked when things went wrong. So when someone had a stroke and certain parts of their speech or their body didn't work, then we were like, oh, that's related to that part of the brain. And equally, if we did surgery and, for a tumor or something, and you touch certain parts of the brain and the person jerked their leg or spoke, then you think, oh, that's to do with...
Right.
Yeah. Once we could scan healthy brains, we could see lots of things like what happens when you have an emotion or, you make a good decision. But also we could see how much the brain was changing in response to everything that it's experiencing. And we saw that process was active till we were 25.
Okay.
And just to remind people how amazing that process is, think of your kids when they went from 0 to 2. They literally could do nothing for themselves at first and completely relied on you for survival. And by the age of 2, they're telling you what to do. Some in up to 5 languages. They can learn up to 5 languages at the same time in the first 2 years of their life, as long as a different person speaks each one to them individually. They are walking independently. They can control their bladder and their bowels, and and of course more growth and learning from then. So people saying, I don't have the power to manifest as an adult is literally like someone saying, there is absolutely no way I could learn Spanish as an adult. So it's going to be harder than it was when you were at school, right? But most people could. Some people I know just don't like languages, but it's something like a language or a musical instrument. It's a difficult thing to learn. But if you gave up your day job and spent a year having lessons and practicing every day, you would become fluent.
Yes.
Now, of course, we're not going to ask everyone to give up their day job and start manifesting full time. So it has to kind of start small. You have to kind of almost build up that trust muscle with it by doing things that are achievable, like within your grasp, that you feel you have more agency over. My favorite way of doing it is through a vision board. And I will purposely have things on my vision board that I know there's a lot I can do about kind of making that happen. And then the other ones, I'll allow them to just run kind of slightly under the radar for the whole year. And I'll do what I can, but that may be more limited. And I sometimes do mine on Pinterest. So that means I can move things from the board to an area that says manifested. So I'm continually visually reminding myself, I did that one, got that one.
I see.
And then that helps you to think of maybe new ways or opportunities to make the ones come true that might have seemed a bit harder at the beginning of the year.
Are there any limitations to what we should place on our vision board or what we should attempt to manifest? Because I would imagine, so many people will have relationship or would desire a relationship, a home, maybe different job, could be children. Are these all fair? We can manifest all of these.
Yeah.
All of these. 10 million pounds.
That one, if you're a hedge fund trader, yeah, sure, put that on. But I wouldn't put that on in the first year if you are currently earning 50,000.
Okay.
Because all you're going to do is show yourself that you can fail.
Okay. So how do we determine what is within grasp and what is beyond when we're manifesting?
The process of doing vision boards every year over several years has obviously really helped me to hone that.
Okay.
And with a couple of friends, when I was staying with them, they said, please, could you look at my board? And there were just some things that were obvious to me that should be moved or removed or replaced. And both gave me amazing feedback afterwards. So I think it's a skill that you build up over time.
Okay.
But I will certainly say that when I did my first one, I kept it very realistic. So I did my first one when I had just changed career, so given up medicine and started my coaching career at the time. And I can't remember everything that was on it, but there was a certain amount of money on it. And a coach who was kind of helping me with it challenged me about why I'd chosen that figure. And I said, well, that's what I need to live for a year. And she said, I think you should double it. And I remember thinking, doubling it seems really unrealistic. I mean, maybe I could increase it so it's not just what I need, but it's kind of, a little bit more of a measure of success. But she really pushed me. So I did put the double figure on it, and I did make that year. And it wasn't a huge figure, but it was double of what I said I needed to live for a year, kind of thing. But if I had put, $1 million on there, I would have got to the end of the year and thought I was a failure. I'm not going to set myself up for that. Obviously, the number has increased over time. And at one point, I just stopped making it a number and just made it a symbol of abundance. Because mine are much more metaphorical now. And I feel like that gives me a bit of room for magic, if you know what I mean.
Yes. Let's say that it's someone who's in a 20-year relationship and they feel as if their relationship is stagnant and they want more from their relationship. And they're flipping through a magazine and they see a couple laughing, giggling on the beach.
Yeah.
And it feels they have that reaction. So you're saying take that image, place it on the board.
Yeah.
Okay. Then what's the next step?
Place it somewhere prominent that you can see it regularly. So my ideal place is next to my bed because you see it at least twice a day. And there is an advantage to seeing it last thing at night as well. Did you ever play Tetris on a Game Boy?
Oh my gosh, I still play Tetris.
Do you? And when you close your eyes, do you see the numbers dropping?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so that's called the Tetris effect. And you can get a bit of that by having your image right next to your bed so you see it before you close your eyes.
Okay.
Because a lot of psychological work goes on overnight. And what you're doing is you're imprinting that image onto your subconscious, and then you're taking advantage of 3 neurological processes that make it more likely that you'll notice and grasp opportunities to move closer to your goal during your waking hours. And they are selective filtering, selective attention, and value tagging.
Okay.
We're bombarded with so much information, our brain has to filter most of it out. So that's why you don't feel your clothes on your skin all day, because it's data that you don't really require. And the brain is doing that kind of just automatically all the time. So a farm in Jamaica is a luxury. It's not crucial to your survival. So your brain isn't going to be spending a whole lot of time thinking about how do I get a farm in Jamaica. It's going to be thinking about who's my next podcast guest and
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So by priming it with imagery, you're making it more likely that your brain isn't just filtering that out.
Interesting. But if it was the relationship, though, if it was the happy, the couple who's happy on the beach, let's say that in my current relationship, I wasn't happy. It seems like that's critical enough where I would constantly be thinking about that one.
That's true. But maybe not doing anything about it.
Okay.
So, even having that image there of a really happy couple laughing is going to start changing your mindset from relationship stale and, this is what I'm stuck with for the rest of my life to maybe I watch, a TED talk by a psychologist that says you can restart a marriage at any time.
Okay.
Or you start reading some books about it, or you go to therapy when you wouldn't have done that before.
Okay.
So I think it's about changing your mind and then looking for opportunities. So in that one, the relationship one, it would go from feeling like you're stuck in this situation now to perhaps being more proactive about what you could do differently to reignite that relationship. And, potentially, of course, the answer to that could be that you both go your separate ways and find new relationships with other people.
Yes.
And it's fresh and you're laughing on the beach. It's sort of, there's a variety of solutions that could be beneficial for both.
All right, that's fair.
Yeah.
But that, so you mentioned that those 3, there was value tagging.
Selective filtering we talked about.
Okay.
So selective attention is the fact that you are, they say when you buy a new car, you suddenly see the exact same car everywhere.
Yes.
So the fact that you've got this image so prominent for you means you're more likely to see a for sale advert, or you're more likely to tell your friends that this is what your dream is. And then one of your friends in Jamaica says, hey, I saw a plot come up for sale.
Interesting.
If you don't like tell anyone, then no one can help you.
I see. So in the relationship context, you're probably seeing, you're more aware of maybe other couples. You're perhaps, more aware of the advertisement for counseling. You're more aware of the TED Talk that pops up that talks about. So you're more aware of these things. All right, fair.
And probably, because you notice I said you're more likely to notice and grasp opportunities. So you're probably more likely to do something about it as well, rather than.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So this is the first step, though. And having that image on the vision board is that's the entry point. But then, is there anything else that we should be doing to manifest?
Yeah. So visualization. So whether it's, some people can't visualize, it's called aphantasia. So vision boards are great for them because you can actually look at a real image. But whether it's looking at your board or closing your eyes and literally with all of your senses, seeing yourself on that farm in Jamaica, like what it smells like, what the earth's like underfoot, what, sounds you're hearing, really immersing yourself in that. Because for the brain, there isn't that much of a difference between actually doing something and having visualized it. So when you visualize it repeatedly, it doesn't feel like such a new or scary thing because the brain doesn't like new things, doesn't like change. So, visualization is a great way of practicing going on a date, for example. See yourself, what you're wearing, where you'll be, who you'll be meeting, see it going really well, see you both laughing, and see at the end that he asks you for a second date, like go in like that, rather than nervous or thinking, another kind of, blind date or whatever.
But on that note of visualization and using that for your dates, do you feel like you set the expectation too high?
So I wouldn't pin that to expectation. I would just do the visualization as a meditation and just be so grateful for that potential outcome. And maybe it's not going to be the next date, but that's the outcome that you want and you're visualizing it and you're going on these dates to make it more likely to come true.
The year is up and I don't have the farm in Jamaica. Or I'm not on the beach with my partner and we're laughing, then what do we do next?
Some things do take a bit longer than a year. So, like I said, building up the trust muscle, if you can look back and say, oh, well, those 3 or 4 things on my board have come true. I actually remember a year where it was 2015 and I had said to my friend, who's a professor of neuroscience at UCL, I'm going to find husband number 2 this year. And it was December. And he said, well, you didn't find husband number 2, did you? But then for me, it happened the following February. So like 2 months later.
Look at that.
So some things just are a bit go into the following year. Quite often, about 50% of the time, I'll keep the board from last year because there are still things pending. And I'll just add new things over the top of things that I've already manifested. So it's not a hard and fast rule for a year, but I think if you're, repeatedly in a pattern of things not working out, then there's probably a lot of deep work to do. And I suggest to people that if, something bad keeps repeating or something good just never happens, then journaling is a great way to analyze your thoughts around your sense of deservingness of that thing, because that's often the root cause of not manifesting.
With manifesting, I think there's a large group of people who, quite honestly, I hate to say it, but I feel like there's no action.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's my point.
There's just zero action. And this has become the narrative around law of attraction to a certain extent.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's really helpful that people like me and Dr. James Doty, who's also a neuroscientist, are writing about it in a way that is based in some science, that is really practical, can talk about cases of success. I mean, the number of DMs I get from people saying, I'm engaged, I'm pregnant, I started my own business is just wonderful. And I'm lucky that I get that all the time because it's just reminding me all the time how amazing manifestation is.
Yes.
And I like to share those stories when I get them as well.
Absolutely.
But I just want to finish off the process for you because I really want you to do this.
Okay, done. I'm going to do it.
So get the images, get them right. I always say leave them in a pet-proof, child-proof, wind-proof place for overnight. Look at it again the next day. Once you're sure it's right, glue it on. Some people never glue it on because they don't feel they deserve it. That's another thing I found. So, be sure that this is what I want. If you feel okay to do this, then you could even put it somewhere that other people might see it. Because, like I said, people want to help you when that happens. They don't judge you.
So even in this case, would you recommend posting this on social media? Or is it too much?
If people want to. So a lot of people send me their vision boards.
Okay.
And I always say, can I repost this anonymously? So then I take a screenshot and I remove their name and I repost it so that people can see examples of them.
Okay.
But I'm not going to, post something that someone gave me in confidence. But if I chose to post my own one, obviously that would be fine. So it's the visualizing, but then also bringing your other senses in to really integrate it for you. And then in that moment of believing that this is like here and now, and I'm standing in my farm in Jamaica, just give gratitude for that being true. Because that's putting your brain away from the fear and shame states associated with cortisol into the love and trust and joy and excitement state associated with oxytocin. So it's kind of bringing some, like we talked about before, it's bringing that love and oxytocin into your brain state, and you're much more likely to manifest from that state than a fear state.
Yes. And how often should I be doing this? Should the visualization piece?
I would say place the board where you're seeing it at least once a day.
Okay.
And then with all these foundational practices like journaling and gratitude, for me, when I start them, I do them every day for a year till it's ingrained in my brain. That's neuro-plasticity. And then later, I just do them when I feel that I need to.
When it comes to our relationships, new partners, a better, the increased behavior, positive behavior of a partner, we can manifest these things.
We can manifest these things, but there's a lot we can be doing in the real world to make these things be true.
Yes.
I think I'm just going to give a really extreme example here, but when people are at an age where everyone's kind of getting married and starting to have babies and stuff, there's, a bit of a mismatch in the group. There's usually a 5-year period where that's happening for some people and it's not happening for others. And so I've had a lot of examples of people saying, well, I want that too. And I definitely want to have a family, like before I'm age, whatever. But rather than taking, the multivitamins that are going to improve your fertility, they're going out partying because they think that's the way that they might meet a partner. So, your actions have to align with what you're saying. And also what you're saying really mustn't be just because that's what everybody else is doing and you think that's what you want. It must be something, I call it magnetic desire, something that you genuinely, truly want, like logically, emotionally, and intuitively.
Does social contagion at all impact our ability to manifest?
Yeah. So if you're surrounded by people who are into manifestation and visualization and they encourage you and they give you examples of what they've done, then of course you're much more likely to do that. But if you're the one person in your group that's trying to manifest and everyone else thinks it's woo-woo, then it's going to be harder.
It's not going to happen. Yeah. And how do you define social contagion?
It's about what's acceptable socially. And so what's in your group, your community, your tribe is going to have some impact on some of your choices. So it's very unusual, for example, that one person is the only smoker in a group. It's very unusual that there's only one married couple in a group. So it's what's normal for you. And that has a cascade effect. So, you often see strings of divorces, or you often see people putting on weight, and then kind of like the whole group does. So let's say you had a group of friends that were all single. I'm not saying like if they're like really good old friends that you get rid of them and only hang out with married people, but maybe you could help each other and say, what is it about us and the way we think and the way we, behave in the world that's keeping us all single? Let's manifest this together kind of thing.
Yes.
But if you want to be healthy with your partner and they want to sit on the couch and eat chips all day, then something, has to change.
Yes. And you're saying, it sounds like you're saying that if you are unhappy in your relationship, then there's a higher likelihood that there are other people in your social circle who are also unhappy.
I don't think we can say that, but what we
Okay.
can say is that if you're unhappy in your relationship, but you're staying together because all of your friends are married and have been for a long time, then if one of those friends suddenly says, actually, we're getting divorced, you're more likely to then do so because you were already unhappy, but it didn't feel socially acceptable to divorce.
Okay. That's
And
fair.
so let's put it like this. Like, you talked about that couple 20 years together, it's gone stale. It's very easy to stay in that situation. But if amongst your group of mostly married friends, someone cheats and that triggers a divorce, then even though you haven't had a trigger like that, it might make you think, oh, okay, well, he left the marriage and he's doing okay. And, after a while, he met someone really nice. Maybe that could happen for me. But when you're all in staying in relationships, whether you're happy or not, you imagine, don't you, that you'll never meet someone else, or that, you'll have loads of bad experiences, or you won't get something better than what you've got. So it definitely keeps you stuck.
Yeah, it does. And another area that I love to talk about is cortisol. Because cortisol seems to be, devastating to our lives, or should I say the mismanagement of cortisol. So in particular, what is cortisol and how does it impact our relationships?
Cortisol is at the extreme other end from oxytocin. So oxytocin is about love and trust, as we've discussed, and cortisol is about stress. And it correlates with the basic human emotions: fear, anger, disgust, shame, and sadness. And basically, when we feel any of those emotions, our cortisol levels will be elevated. And if we have cortisol levels elevated for some reason, like we've got a really tight deadline or something, then we will start to feel emotions like that rather than joy and excitement and love and trust.
Yes.
So they correlate really, completely. Cortisol is actually part of our 24-hour body clock. So like melatonin helps us to fall asleep, cortisol helps us to wake up. And so the highest level of cortisol is just before we wake up. And then during the day, there's a normal range, depending on your age and gender, where it will fluctuate. And if you were running late for our meeting today, you might get a little spike of cortisol on the way here. But then once you got here and I said, Paul, it's fine, I was late too, it'll go back down again. But when we're under chronic stress, that's the problem. And it's been a problem for a long time. I obviously changed careers during the financial crisis and was dealing with a lot of very stressed individuals then. So that's like 16 years ago. And then the pandemic put us under chronic stress again. You could argue that we've kind of probably been in it the whole time, but highest levels of. And the mental health consequences of the pandemic, of post-pandemic, of relationship breakdowns, loss of sense of self, loss of, sense of purpose, loss through actual death. A lot of people are really stressed at the moment. And that means that your cortisol levels are at the highest level or even above it most of the time. And we have receptors in the brain that monitor these levels, for our survival. And when they see that, it's high all the time, the brain thinks, I'm about to die. And so it goes in literally into survival mode. And in your brain, that pulls your blood supply away from your higher functions to just like the basic, functions. And in your body, that cortisol is corrosive. It's corroding your immune system. It's making you sick. And I don't just mean colds and flus. It leads all the way up to heart attacks and cancers. And there are implications of those things for relationships too. If your partner's always sick, if your partner gets a really, bad illness, then that's going to change the dynamic of your relationship as well. Or if you do, obviously. And as a survival mechanism, it will encourage us to retain belly fat in case starvation is one of the reasons that we're about to die. So, again, if somebody significantly changes shape or size in a relationship, that can sometimes cause problems as well. But mentally, the parts of the brain that you need to attend to a relationship, because it's hard work all the time, that will go. Your ability to do that, your ability to be emotionally intelligent, to be flexible, to solve problems, to be creative, to not fall back on your biases, that will just all be gone.
This is why it's devastating.
Yeah.
And to your point, we're living in a day and age where I feel like most of us are under chronic stress. So how do we manage our cortisol levels given the state of the world and the complexity of relationships?
Yeah, it's very hard. It's almost like a full-time job, and I kind of feel a bit guilty saying that, because speaking about that and living like that is my job. And I really have so much empathy for people at the moment at how hard this is. And that's why I do so many podcast appearances, to try and give people nuggets of things that they can do. So the quickest fix, and this is up there with the Oxytocin nasal spray. These are the two things that people Google after they hear
I was
me.
going to say, these are the two things I will definitely do after this.
So magnesium is a mineral that's very crucial to stress. It actually underpins 300 processes in our body, one of which is stress management, but it also gets very depleted by stress. So it's a bit of a, vicious circle. And if you're chronically stressed and you're depleting your magnesium levels, it's very hard to replace them naturally. So naturally, we would get it from nuts and seeds and leafy green vegetables. But I would say supplementation with magnesium is the easiest thing you can go out and do today if you're feeling really stressed.
I'm doing that tonight.
I actually bathe in it 3 to 5 times a week because it's best taken in through your skin.
Okay.
It's also good for your skin and your joints. But some people like to take certain supplements because it can also have a slightly laxative effect, and that can be helpful for some people if, for example, stress is causing constipation. Because cortisol causes inflammation throughout the whole body, and it also causes systemic dryness, so dryness of the whole system. So as long as you're drinking enough water, there is a potential usage of the laxative effect of it as well. And then, again, journaling, because it's getting these, survival emotions a way out of your mind. Light physical exercise, enough to make you sweat, but not high intensity, because that can spike your cortisol levels. That can also help to sweat out excess cortisol levels. Talking therapies, again, is kind of like it's like journaling, but it's, it's with somebody else and it's kind of in a safe space and everything. It could be speaking to a friend, but therapy if you need to take it to the next level. How do people know if they're stressed? So basically, because cortisol is related to the sleep-wake cycle, sleep disturbance is a sign, and that could be difficulty falling asleep, waking up in the middle of the night, or waking up early or even at the normal time and just not feeling refreshed.
Okay.
Because of the gut-brain connection, which I mentioned right at the beginning when we were talking about love, any indigestion, reflux, bloating, that can often be a sign of stress. Magnesium deficiency shows up as like micromuscular twitches, but often under the eyelid. Okay. So that's a really good sign.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Can I say this? This is something that, I've told you this, but I need to say this, is that you have changed my life.
Thank you.
And you know how you've changed my life? And as you're talking about all of these ways that stress shows up, the signals, I was thinking, wow, I had all of those things. I would wonder why my eye would twitch. My eye would twitch all the time. I would wake up in the middle of the night. I was retaining more fat around my stomach. So this was almost a year ago. I was watching you on a podcast. Actually, my wife was watching you on a podcast, and you were talking about now I know it's not intermittent fasting, but it was restrictive eating.
Yeah.
And I started doing that.
Yeah.
My life has changed. It has changed, and I thank you for it.
Oh.
I thank you for it, because no more eye twitch. I've got an 8-pack under this shirt.
Have you?
I sleep through the night.
Wow.
sleep through the night. I have no anxiety. I used to basically drink CBD like a milkshake. I have not used CBD whatsoever. Mentally, cognitively, I feel faster than I've ever felt in my life. And it's one of these where I specifically attribute it to restrictive eating. And so one is I want to thank you for that from the bottom of my heart. My life has changed.
Yeah.
But do you think that that also is an antidote? Because I feel like that is something that I use. That was a mechanism that I used.
Yeah. That people have to be a little bit careful about that, because it does increase your resilience through the fact that it puts you through little bit of stress because there's a long period of fasting. So I think you and I both do the same 12 till 8.
Yes.
There are a lot of benefits to that. I think probably what I would say is actual intermittent fasting, which is when you reduce your calorie intake drastically for 2 non-consecutive days of the week. I wouldn't do that if you're stressed.
Fair.
But the time-restricted eating can be helpful for people because it can be a way of getting rid of some of that belly fat, as long as you also address the causes of the stress. Unless you're kind of already eating really healthily, and you're not sedentary and you're kind of like doing most of the right things, that should wait till you've got the basics under control.
Okay. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
So also, you mentioned earlier, is there cortisol bleeding in essence, where your cortisol literally bleeds out to people around you?
Well, it leaks out through your sweat. You're giving me images of blood spraying everywhere.
But wow, so cortisol leaks out from sweat.
Yeah.
So,
Like estrogen and progesterone do, and that's how women synchronize their periods.
okay. So in essence, someone who has high cortisol levels, sweating nearby, then increases your cortisol levels.
Yes, but with that, unlike with the women and periods, it's regardless of gender, but it matters on status. So the silverback gorilla, his cortisol levels affect all the other gorillas more than they affect each other. So this has huge implications for leadership.
Yes.
And I've worked with a lot of stressed CEOs and CFOs, but it also, you may be the leader of your family, you're maybe the leader of a sports team or something like that. So in the workplace, whatever the hierarchy is, it's causing stress downwards.
Interesting. So the higher your status, when you're whatever hierarchy, the more that you display the cortisol. So the cortisol leak, should I say?
Yeah.
Because you can have a high cortisol level, but still hide it in essence.
And actually that's worse because when you're repressing it, it makes it higher.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you should.
Well, so the difficulty here is, especially when I worked with CFOs, that they're not going to go out and announce, so the numbers are doing terribly to make themselves feel better. They'll be, trying to fix things behind the scenes. So that's a tough one. But that's why for an individual, that's why I suggest journaling and talking therapy, because that is a way of expelling what you're, holding in.
Wow, this is so fascinating. One other thing, and then we'll wrap up because I know we've hit time, is you mentioned in there that if we have high cortisol levels, we're under stress. If we're working out above a minimal sweat, then that can spike. That's counter to what I often hear.
Yeah.
Everyone says, I'm stressed, go to the gym.
Yeah.
So you're saying don't do that.
You can go to the gym, but don't lift like super heavy weights or like, kind of sprint until you're passing out.
Because that'll just spike our levels.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I was at a lunch with friends, and there was a really nice lady there who was a law firm partner, but I immediately clocked her as one of my type A, clients. And she was talking about how many hours she works and how stressed she is, and then talking about the high intensity classes that she does at the gym to try to relieve stress. And I just looked at her, hardly knew her, and I said, "You are exactly the person that should not be doing that." And she went, "I know," because it's part of that same drive and, addiction, like working excessive hours, traveling excessively, exercising, to such a high intensity. We can't run away from ourselves forever. There's that beautiful phrase, "Wherever I go, there I am." And I just think that people have suffered so much in the last few years, particularly, and the world is in such a difficult place at the moment that the more love that any of us can bring into the world and like the more healing that people are prepared to do, and not to have fear about that, I think is really important, because we do see after grief and divorce a spike in testicular cancer for men and breast cancer for women after 18 months. And that's because of the cortisol levels.
Yes. Yes. Is there anything that we did not discuss that you'd like to discuss today?
There's actually so much that I think we need to come back on. I've got two like quirky little things that I didn't get to say at the beginning, which I'd love to be able to add in
Please,
now.
especially if it's quirky.
Yeah. So if you inject a rabbit with the urine of a woman that's pregnant, the rabbit will get her period in a few days' time.
That is the quirkiest stat that I've ever heard.
Do you want me to explain it?
Please, yes.
So rabbits have a 12-day menstrual cycle, and they're only infertile for 4 days, so that's when they've got their period. So basically, being injected with the hormone beta-HCG, which is the one that's used for pregnancy tests, when they get a little hit of that hormone in their system, they immediately release eggs, and then a few days later they have their period.
Oh my gosh.
If you liked that one,
I love that one.
I don't know which one you're going to love more, but this is my parting gift to you.
All right, here we go.
My friend at MIT has created an AI, an artificial nose. And he's created it so it can detect certain cancers, but it can also detect pregnancy before any other existing pregnancy test and tell you who the father is.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? That's next level.
I know.
Do you know there are many men who are going to try to destroy that? Destroy that tool by any means necessary.
I know.
I mean, I guess I can't even go into the how, but that's incredible.
Yeah, I've got a whole load of research on that if you ever want to interview me again.
Yeah.
But I just thought I couldn't leave this podcast with you without giving those two.
Those are, I mean, the second one is my favorite. The second one, I think we could spend an hour on.
Yeah.
I mean, do you know how that changes the world? That changes the world.
Yeah. It's got a lot of implications. Let's just leave it at that.
A lot. Let's hide his name because let's keep him safe. Wow. Okay, fair enough. And anything else?
I'm not.
You sure?
I'm not giving you more than that, Paul.
Please give us one more. No. Well, I then have the last one for you.
Okay.
Everyone gets this one.
Mm-hmm.
So, I know you have had amazing conversations all throughout your life, right? If you could think back to the most memorable conversation you had, who was it with? What did you talk about?
I mean, it's going to have to be, if it was a bit one-sided, but was my husband proposing to me.
That's all we need. That's all we need. Love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're definitely going to do a part 2, a part 3, a part 4, a part 5, 6, 7, 8. But I'm also going to create a vision board.
I can't wait to see it.
And I'm going to send it to you. I think I'm going to do that on my holiday.
That's a great time to do it, especially because of where you'll be.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, done. I'm going to do it.
Because you could take photos, actually.
Of me there with the breeze, walking around.
Exactly.
And then place it.
If Jill can capture an image of you with just that look of bliss on your face, that would be so motivating for your brain.
But thank you so much.
Thank you.
I absolutely adore Dr. Tara. Not only is it great to have her as a guest, but it is an honor to have her as a friend. And I want to share with you just 3 of the many takeaways that I'm bringing from this episode. The first, and this is one that I often tell my son, and that is that dreams without action are just fantasies. Now, while your creativity, intelligence, and intuition are powerful tools, they mean nothing without effort. You can envision the life that you want, but you must step into the world and make it happen. One decision, one action at a time. Sitting at home, hoping for a success, that it just falls into your lap, it only leaves you waiting. The truth is nothing changes unless you move. So stop waiting for the perfect moment or the stars to align. The moment is now, and the stars will align when you do. Go out, show up, and make it real. The next takeaway is that true alignment happens when your actions reflect what you genuinely desire, not what others expect or what seems trendy. Dr. Tara calls this a magnetic desire, a goal that resonates with you logically, emotionally, and intuitively. Following what everyone else wants clouds our ability to know our own dreams. But manifestation starts with clarity. What do you truly want? When your words and actions align with your deepest intentions, you create momentum. The path becomes clear because it's yours. Stop chasing what's popular. Start pursuing what feels magnetic to you. And lastly, gratitude isn't just a mindset. It's neuroscience. When you shift your focus away from fear, shame, and stress, you reduce cortisol, the hormone linked to anger, sadness, and chronic stress. Elevated cortisol can make you feel sick, which impacts your mental and physical health. On the other hand, gratitude moves your brain into states of love, trust, and joy, powered by oxytocin, the feel-good hormone. This shift is more than emotional, it's biological. By practicing gratitude, you rewire your brain, lower stress, and cultivate well-being. Gratitude isn't just a nice idea. It's a science-backed pathway to a healthier, happier you. And last but not least, this is so important, journaling is more than just writing. It's a tool to process and release what Dr. Tara calls survival emotions, like fear, stress, and anxiety. These emotions can clutter your mind, keeping you stuck in reactive states. By putting your thoughts on paper, you're not just venting, you're freeing up mental space, bringing clarity and reducing overwhelm. You'll notice that I often suggest to guests on this show the importance of journaling, and I'm so glad to hear Dr. Tara endorse this practice as well. If you feel weighed down by survival emotions, journaling might just be the release your mind needs to thrive. As always, thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you next time. And just remember, around 9 in 10 of you watching these videos aren't subscribed yet. Now, no pressure at all, but if you're enjoying the content, subscribing is a super simple way to stay connected with us, and it also helps a ton when growing the channel. We also look at every comment, so make sure you comment with your guest ideas below, and we'll get your favorite guest on our future episodes. We Need to Talk is quite literally brought to you by Adobe Express, the quick and easy create anything app from Adobe. The team uses it to create materials for the show, from the cover art to the social posts. But I think you'll get a lot out of it too. What sets Adobe Express apart is how it puts content creation within reach for everyone. Whether you're making a personal vision board, drafting a business manifesto, or creating social content on the go. With templates for everything from Instagram Reels to presentations, you can easily make it your own without starting from scratch. It's intuitive and accessible, so you can bring your ideas to life effortlessly. And that's the beauty of it. Adobe Express makes sure that creativity isn't just for the professionals. It's for anyone with an idea. It levels the playing field, giving you the confidence to create something that truly stands out, no matter where you're starting from. Search Adobe Express to get started.